The United States Treasury Secretary has asked China to reduce the production of electric vehicles, solar panels, and other clean energy goods because it can hurt producers and jobs in the United States and of course globally. So she's asking China to slow down. Hey guys, welcome back, Willene here. So the United States Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is in China on a 6-day visit to discuss very key economic issues, and her message started in southern China's city of Guangzhou, which is, as we all know, one of China's biggest economic power hub. So she had to stop over in Guangzhou before heading to Beijing for more meetings. Now, according to Xinhua news agency, Yellen and the Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng had discussions on the current economic situations between the United States and China, including global situations. Now, the Vice Premier and the Treasury Secretary agreed to a dialogue, and the Treasury Secretary Yellen hopes on her part that China and the US can have a level playing field, which can also protect US workers and businesses. Now here's where a big question comes in. Does this mean the economic trade war is weighing down on the United States economy? And of course, despite all the multiple sanctions placed on Chinese businesses, who is losing more and who is winning more? Well, I'll leave that for you to answer. Now, the Treasury Secretary went ahead to accuse China of overcapacity, especially in the green energy sector, which indirectly interprets to products like EVs and solar energy, with claims that China's overcapacity is a huge problem for other countries.
And this includes the issue of China's industrial overcapacity, which the United States and other countries are concerned can cause global spillover.
And as we all know, China's green energy is definitely helping the world and of course seems to be breaking boundaries. But on the flip side, the competition is getting more and more serious globally. Reason why I believe Yellen is complaining about China's overcapacity. And again, if China takes over every market, jobs on the other end of the world, which is on the western end of the world, will definitely be lost and markets will be affected. Well, that's according to the Treasury Secretary.
China is now simply too large for the rest of the world to absorb this enormous capacity. Actions taken by the PRC today can shift world prices. And when the global market is flooded by artificially cheap Chinese products, the viability of American and other foreign firms is put into question.
Again, guys, about the overcapacity of EVs, I think the problem should not be on China and China's EVs, but it should be on a global EV stage. And not just China, of course, because Tesla itself, which is from the US, is also producing EVs and of course supplying globally in their numbers to many countries around the world. So I think it's the legacy automakers like Volkswagen, Mercedes, and Toyota that need to be worried about the EV advancement globally rather than the US worrying about China's EV overcapacity, because as we all know, EVs will definitely be the future, not just for China alone, but also for every country around the world. And EVs are not only helping China, but it's also helping every country around the world, even the developing countries. So should we expect more sanctions from the US on Chinese businesses, just like it's been done before with Huawei, BYD, alongside other Chinese companies in the USA? That's the question we need to be asking ourselves, because I believe when the Treasury Secretary is mentioning all of this overcapacity, then maybe more sanctions are coming. And by the way, guys, when the US Treasury Secretary says there is overcapacity from China, what does she really mean? Now, let me give you a backstory in this case. As we all know, in recent years, China's production capacity has been on the rise exponentially, especially in the tech and EV sector, despite multiple claims by media outlets that China's production is falling. I've said it before in many of my previous videos that China is currently increasing its tech production. And with the multiple EVs being produced here in China, more products are flowing into the European market and of course other markets around the world. And I believe that's the reason why the EU has also been trying to investigate on Chinese subsidies on EVs and also the cheap EVs that have been flooding into the European market, because they believe it's also affecting their markets and their industries back in Europe.
Tech companies like competition. They know that global competition is good for business and that it creates and protects jobs here in Europe. But competition is only true as long as it is fair. Too often our companies are excluded from foreign markets or are victims of predatory practices. They are often undercut by competitors benefiting from huge state subsidies. We have not forgotten how China's unfair trade practices affected our solar industry.
And as we all can see in this case with the Treasury Secretary from the US, it's a similar situation where she is requesting that China slows down on the production of clean energy products like the EVs and solar. And as I mentioned earlier, this is probably the reason for the word overcapacity. And by the way, guys, after Guangzhou, the Treasury Secretary then arrived Beijing, where she met with the Chinese Premier, Li Qiang, who, according to Xinhua News, said China and the US needed to respect each other and should be partners and not adversaries. So I believe these words from the Chinese Premier comes in response to the multiple sanctions and, of course, the trade restrictions on the part of the US on multiple Chinese companies and businesses. Now, Xinhua News even quoted the Chinese Premier Li saying that the US needs to refrain from turning economic and trade issues into political or security issues and view the issues of production capacity from a market-oriented and global perspective. And like I said before, this is probably due to the continued sanctions on Chinese tech products and the chip industry, which is also directly and indirectly affecting Chinese businesses globally. And of course, it also affects the consumers, not just in China, but in the US and of course on the global stage. And when we observe correctly, we can realize that most of these sanctions are also linked to the geopolitical tensions that have been happening globally between China, the USA, Russia, and other countries around the world. So I believe most of these sanctions and tariffs are also linked to political situations happening globally. Now, guys, I got a few questions for you guys watching this video right now. Should China slow down the EV production in order for other countries to catch up, or should the US just try to catch up with the EV production, maybe boost their EV production industry and of course clean energy? What is your suggestion? Feel free to drop it down in the comments below and we can talk about it. Now, at the end of the day, I think in the past when China had the issue of pollution, Western powers pressurized China, complaining of China's destruction of maybe the ecosystem with their polluted cities and causing trouble globally. Now China has switched to a more clean energy and producing more clean products, which in turn reduces the carbon emissions globally, and they are still complaining. So in this situation right now, is it the old China or the current China that is better? So if there's complaints of overcapacity of clean energy, should China stop or really slow down on the production of clean energy products? Because I believe if China slows down, it won't just affect China alone, but it will also affect many other smaller and developing countries that depend on China for these clean energy products. Nevertheless, guys, from my own personal point of view as a citizen of the world, doing my best to analyze and understand the detailed situations like this, I just hope that both countries, that's the US and China, can find common ground for free trade and growth. Because the truth is that whether we like it or not, the China-US geopolitical tensions and trade war is definitely affecting every country globally, either directly or indirectly. Reason why I believe we all should be very concerned. Well, let's see what the future holds, especially with the US elections on the horizon, and what kind of sanctions will come up in the near future. That's all for today, guys. Feel free to like this video so more people can see it. And of course, if this is your first time here, feel free to subscribe to this channel for weekly videos like this. Thank you so much and I appreciate you. Remember, this is Willene. See you next time.